HOA brought cops to my ranch, but their map didn't match mine. I put up a simple warning sign on my land. Nothing loud, nothing threatening, just a line that said this ground was mine. 3 days later, the HOA showed up with police, telling me I might be trespassing on my own property. That's when I realized this wasn't about a trail. It was about control. And the harder they pushed, the more they exposed. If you've ever seen something like this coming your way, you might want to stick around and maybe subscribe, because this one didn't end the way they thought it would. I set the post myself. Steel, not wood. 2 feet deep in the ground, tamped tight with gravel and dirt, the way I'd done 1,000 fence posts over the years. The sign was simple. Black letters on white metal. Private property. No trespassing. Nothing aggressive. No threats. No legal jargon. Just a line in the dirt that said what any man with land has the right to say. I stepped back, wiped the dust off my hands, and looked down the narrow trail that cut through the back edge of my property. It ran between 2 old oaks, dipped slightly toward the creek, then disappeared toward the lake beyond the ridge. It had probably been there longer than I'd owned the place. Maybe longer than the last owner, too. Didn't matter. The survey said it was mine. I didn't block it. Didn't put up a gate. Didn't string barbed wire across it. Just a sign. A quiet reminder that this wasn't public ground. For a while it worked. First day, nothing. Second day, I noticed fewer footprints in the dirt. Third day, I thought maybe people got the message. I was wrong. It was just after noon when I heard tires crunching up my gravel driveway. Not one set. 2. Heavy, slow, deliberate. The kind of sound that doesn't belong to someone just turning around. I set my coffee down on the porch rail and stood up. 2 cruisers came into view, white and blue, lights off, but presence loud enough. They rolled to a stop near my truck like they'd been here before. Doors opened almost at the same time. Uniforms stepped out first. Then her. Linda Carver didn't rush. She never did. She stepped out from behind the second cruiser like she was arriving at a meeting she had scheduled, not a property she didn't own. Sunglasses, pressed clothes, posture straight enough to pass inspection. She looked past the officers and straight at me. Didn't wave, didn't smile, just measured. I walked down the porch steps slow. Not because I was nervous, because I wasn't going to meet anyone halfway on my own land. One of the officers approached first. Mid-30s, clean uniform, hand resting just a little too comfortably near his belt. "Afternoon," he said. "Afternoon," I answered. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "We received a complaint about restricted access to community property." I didn't say anything at first. Just let that sit in the air a second. Then I asked, "What community property?" He gestured behind me. "The trail running through this parcel." I turned slightly, just enough to glance back toward the sign. It stood exactly where I'd put it. Straight. Clear. Unambiguous. "That trail runs through my land," I said. That's when the second officer stepped closer. Older. Thicker build. Eyes that had already made up their mind before getting out of the car. "That's what we're here to sort out," he said. Sort out. I'd heard that tone before. Not looking for truth. Looking for compliance. Linda took a few steps forward then, stopping just short of the gravel edge like there was an invisible line she didn't want to cross. Without permission, she assumed she already had. "Mr. Mercer," she said. First time I'd heard my name that day. I hadn't given it to her. "I'm Linda Carver," she continued, like I needed the introduction. "President of Lake Ridge Estates." I didn't ask, I said. Her lips tightened just slightly. Not enough for the officers to notice. Enough for me. She shifted her weight, then nodded toward the trail. That access path has been used by residents for years, she said. Blocking it creates unnecessary conflict. I didn't block anything, I replied. I put up a sign. A sign that implies restriction, she said. It states ownership. She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she looked to the older officer. He cleared his throat. Sir, based on the information we've been given, there may be a dispute regarding the boundary line here. Maybe? I said. He reached into a folder tucked under his arm and pulled out a piece of paper. Folded, clean, prepared. He didn't hand it to me, just held it where I could see it. Map lines, property outlines, the kind of thing most people wouldn't question at a glance. This indicates the trail falls just outside your boundary, he said. I stared at it for a second. Then I looked back at him. But that's not my survey, I said. Well, he replied, shifting his stance. Until ownership is clarified, it might be best if you removed the sign to avoid further issues. There it was. Not an order. A suggestion dressed like authority. I felt something settle in my chest right then. Not anger yet. Not fully. Something sharper. Clarity. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You're telling me I might be trespassing on my own property? The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. The older one didn't. We're saying there's a question, he replied. I looked past them at Linda. She was watching me closely now. Not defensive, not uncertain. Waiting. That's when it hit me. This wasn't confusion. This was planned. I let out a short breath, more through my nose than anything, and pulled my phone out of my pocket. The movement caught their attention immediately. Before we go any further, I said, unlocking the screen, I'm going to need your names and badge numbers. Silence. The younger officer blinked. The older one's jaw tightened. Linda's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The confidence slipped for half a second. Sir, there's no need to escalate, the younger one started. I'm not escalating, I said, tapping the record button. I'm documenting. I held the phone steady. Name, I said, looking directly at the older officer. He hesitated. Just long enough. That was all I needed to know, because men who know they're right don't hesitate to say who they are. The wind moved lightly through the trees behind me. The sign creaked once on its post. Private property. Simple words. Apparently, not simple enough. I lowered the phone slightly, but kept it recording. Funny thing, I said, voice calm now, steadier than before. I paid for this land, signed the papers, walked the boundaries, checked the survey myself. I looked between the two officers, then back at Linda. So I'm trying to figure out, I continued, how a man ends up standing on his own porch, being told he might not belong there. No one answered. Not right away. And that silence told me more than anything they could have said, because this wasn't about a trail, and it sure as hell wasn't about a sign. The question was, what were they really trying to take? I didn't ask it out loud. Not yet. The three of them stood there waiting, two officers pretending this was routine, and Linda Carver watching like she'd already seen how this would end. The younger officer finally gave his name, voice a little tighter than before. The older one followed, slower, like he was choosing his words carefully now that the phone was out. They didn't push again after that. No order to remove the sign. No citation. No warning ticket. Just a few more sentences about clarifying ownership. Then they stepped back, turned, and walked to their cars. Linda stayed a second longer. She lowered her sunglasses just enough to meet my eyes directly. "This isn't over, Mr. Mercer," she said. Same tone as before. Not emotional, not loud. Just certain. Then she turned and left. The sound of their tires faded down the driveway, leaving behind nothing but dust and the faint creak of that sign shifting in the breeze. Private property. I stood there a while longer, phone still in my hand, recording nothing now but empty space. Then I stopped the video. That afternoon, I didn't sit back on the porch. I went inside, straight to the cabinet where I kept the closing documents. Folder was exactly where I left it. Thick, clean, organized. I didn't rush, didn't flip through everything. I already knew what I'd find. Survey map, stamped, filed, recorded with the county. I laid it out on the kitchen table and flattened the corners with both hands. The lines were clear. The trail cut through my land, just like I remembered. No ambiguity, no gray area. So I pulled out my phone again and opened the picture I'd taken of the map the officer held, side by side. That's when I saw it. The difference wasn't obvious at first glance. That's what made it dangerous. Their version shifted the boundary line just enough, barely a few feet. So the trail sat outside my property instead of inside it. Clean, subtle, intentional. Whoever made that map knew exactly what they were doing. I leaned back in the chair and let out a slow breath. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a rewrite. The next morning, I drove into town. Didn't call anyone. Didn't make a scene. Just took the folder, got in my truck, and headed straight for the county records office. Place smelled the same as always. Paper, dust, and time. The woman behind the counter recognized me. Small towns do that. "Back again, Mr. Mercer?" she asked. "Need to see the survey on file," I said. She nodded, disappeared for a minute, then came back with a rolled set of documents and laid them out across the counter. Original plat map, boundary survey, easement records. I didn't need to read everything. I went straight to the line. Same as what I had at home. No shift, no adjustment, no easement. I tapped the paper lightly. "There's no recorded access route through this section?" I asked. She adjusted her glasses and leaned closer. "No, sir," she said. "If there was, it would be listed right here. It's not." "Nothing historical?" I pressed. She shook her head. "Doesn't matter how long people use something. If it's not recorded, it's not legal access." That settled it, at least for me, but not for them. I thanked her, rolled the papers back up, and headed out. Halfway to the truck, something pulled me up short. The memory of that map, the one the officer had. They didn't just say I might be wrong. They brought something that made it look like I was, which meant someone had already built a version of this story where I didn't own that trail. I sat in the truck for a minute before starting it. Then I pulled out the HOA letter that had come a few days earlier. I hadn't paid much attention to it at the time, just another piece of paper trying to sound important. Now I read it again. Carefully. Historic community access route. Long-standing resident use. Encouragement to maintain shared pathways. Language meant to sound official without actually saying anything enforceable. And there it was, clipped to the back. The map. I spread it across the steering wheel, looked at it again, then compared it to the county survey I'd just seen. Same shift. Same clean adjustment. Same lie. My stomach tightened, not with panic, not with fear, with recognition. This wasn't about people walking through my land. This was about establishing something on paper, something that, if left alone long enough, would start to feel real. I folded the letter slowly and set it on the passenger seat. Then I looked out through the windshield toward the road leading back home. Because now the question wasn't whether I owned that land. That part was settled. The real question was, how far were they willing to go to pretend I didn't? I started the engine and pulled out onto the road. By the time I reached my driveway, the dust from earlier had settled. Everything looked the same. Fence intact, gate closed, sign still standing. But it didn't feel the same, because now I knew something hadn't known before. They weren't asking. They weren't confused. They were building a case, and if I didn't stop it early, that trail wouldn't be the only thing they tried to move. I didn't take the sign down, didn't move it an inch. If anything, I checked the post again that evening, pressed my boot against the base, made sure it was still set firm in the ground. It was. Solid. Exactly where it belonged. The next morning, I found the first beer can, crushed, half hidden in the grass just a few feet from the sign. Could have been nothing. Could have been someone careless. I picked it up, tossed it in the bed of my truck, and kept walking. 2 days later, there were 3 more. Different brands, different spots, all within a few yards of that trail entrance. That's when I started paying attention. I walked the boundary line slower after that. Looked at the ground instead of just past it. Noticed footprints where there hadn't been any before. Tire marks off the main path. Small things. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for them. By the end of the week, it wasn't small anymore. Fast food wrappers, cigarette butts, a broken glass bottle near the creek, and someone had pushed one of my fence rails loose, just enough to make it easier to step through without climbing. I stood there staring at it for a long second. That wasn't an accident. That was effort. I fixed it the same way I always fixed things. Quiet, direct, no announcement. Reset the rail, checked the nails, made sure it held. But something had changed. People weren't just passing through anymore. They were testing. Saturday afternoon, I saw them. 3 teenage boys coming down the trail, laughing loud enough to carry across the trees. One had a cooler slung over his shoulder. Another kicked at the dirt like he had somewhere better to be. The third one tossed an empty can into the brush without even looking. I stepped off the porch and walked toward them. Didn't raise my voice, didn't rush. Just met them halfway. "Hey," I said. They slowed, surprised more than anything. "You mind picking that up?" I nodded toward the can. The kid who threw it hesitated, looked at his friends, then shrugged and bent down to grab it. "Sorry," he muttered. "Appreciate it," I said. That was it. No lecture, no threat, no scene. They kept walking, quieter now, heading toward the lake. I watched them go, then turned back toward the house. For a moment, I thought maybe that was enough. That maybe it was just kids being careless. I was wrong. It was just after 8 when the knock came. Not a normal knock. Sharp, repetitive. The kind meant to announce itself. I opened the door and found Linda Carver standing there. Closer this time. No sunglasses, no distance. Up close, she looked exactly like I remembered. Controlled, composed, already irritated. "Did you threaten my son?" she said. No greeting, no hesitation. Just straight to it. It took me half a second to understand what she meant. "I asked him to pick up his trash," I said. Her expression hardened. "You have no right to approach residents using that trail," she replied. "This isn't their trail," I said. "It's my land." She took a step closer, not enough to cross the threshold, but enough to make the point. "That path has been used by this community for years," she said. "Long before you showed up." I didn't move. "Using something doesn't make it yours," I answered. For the first time, her composure cracked. Just a little. "You're creating unnecessary conflict," she said, voice tighter now. People here expect access. Then they should have bought the land, I said. That landed. I saw it in her eyes. Not anger. Calculation. She shifted her stance, straightened slightly, and changed tactics. This can be handled a lot more easily if you cooperate, she said. Otherwise, it becomes a different kind of conversation. There it was. Not a request, a warning. I leaned lightly against the doorframe. What kind of conversation? I asked. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she glanced past me toward the house like she was already picturing something beyond the front door. Let's just say, she said, turning back to me, people who resist community standards tend to find themselves outnumbered. Silence hung between us for a second. Then she stepped back. This isn't over, Mr. Mercer, she added again. Same words, different weight. This time, I noticed something else. She hadn't asked my name, hadn't introduced herself. She already knew exactly who I was, which meant this didn't start with a scene. It started before that. I closed the door and stood there for a moment, listening to her footsteps fade down the porch. Then I walked to the window and watched her leave. No hesitation, no second look, like she'd already decided how this would play out. That night, I didn't sit on the porch. I walked the trail again. Slower this time, more deliberate. Near the creek, I found something new. 2 folding chairs, set up side by side, facing the water like someone planned to come back and sit a while. Not passing through, not visiting. Settling in. I stood there looking at those chairs, then back toward the path leading to the lake. That's when it became clear. This wasn't about access. This was about ownership, without the paperwork. And someone was making sure the line between the two got blurred just enough. I picked up the chairs, carried them back to the trail entrance, and set them right under the sign. Private property. Let whoever left them see it. Clear, direct, unmistakable. As I turned to head back, I noticed something else. Fresh footprints. More than before. And deeper. People weren't backing off. They were coming more often. And now I knew why. Because someone was telling them they had the right to. The question wasn't whether they believed it. The question was, who was making sure they did? I didn't have to wait long to find out. It was early, just after I'd poured my first cup of coffee, when I heard the tires again. Same slow grind on gravel, same deliberate pace. I didn't rush this time, just walked to the window and looked out. One cruiser, then another. And behind them, Linda Carver. She stepped out before the engines even shut off. No hesitation, no pause, like she'd done this before. I set the cup down and walked out onto the porch. The younger officer was there again. This time, I caught his name on the chest plate. Willis. Officer Trent Willis. He didn't wait for me to come down the steps. Morning, he said. Didn't sound like one. What is it this time? I asked. He held something in his hand. Paper. Same kind as before. But this time he didn't just show it. He walked up the steps and handed it to me. Complaint filed, he said. Restricted access to community property. I didn't take my eyes off him as I unfolded it. Same map, same shifted line. Cleaner this time. Marked. Highlighted. Prepared. This again? I said. We're here to recommend you remove the sign until ownership is clarified, he replied. Recommend. Not order. Still dressed like authority. I looked past him at the second officer. Older. Same one from before. He stayed near the bottom of the steps, watching everything without stepping in. Then I looked at Linda. She hadn't moved, just stood there at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, watching the exchange like it was something she'd already approved. "You brought them back for this?" I asked her. She didn't answer me. Willis did. "Sir, this doesn't need to turn into anything bigger than it is." That line, I'd heard it before too, usually right before it did. I stepped back slightly, creating space between us, and held the paper up. "This map is wrong," I said. "According to the information we've received," he started. "Not information," I cut in. "Documents." I walked back inside without waiting for a response. Not fast, not angry, just deliberate. I could feel them watching me as I crossed the kitchen, reached the table, and picked up the folder I'd left open the night before. Then I walked back out, laid the certified survey flat against the railing, turned it toward him. "This is filed with the county," I said. "Stamped, recorded, verified." He glanced at it, didn't lean in, didn't compare it, just looked. "That may be," he said carefully. "But until this is resolved..." "Resolved by who?" I asked. That stopped him. Not completely, just enough. "Sir, I'm trying to keep this simple," he said. "So am I," replied. I tapped the survey. "This line doesn't move because someone prints a new map." Silence. The older officer shifted his weight slightly, eyes moving between the two documents. Linda finally stepped forward. Slow, controlled. "Daniel," she said. First time she'd used my first name, like we were past formalities. "Sometimes these things take time to sort out," she continued. "In the meantime, it would be better for everyone if you didn't create unnecessary tension." I looked at her. Really looked this time. Not at the clothes, not at the posture, at the intent. "You mean if I stop reminding people it's mine?" I said. Her expression didn't change, but she didn't deny it. Willis cleared his throat. "Sir, we're asking you to cooperate." I pulled my phone out again. Didn't say anything. Just hit record. Held it up, same as before. "Let's try this again," I said. "Name and badge number." Willis exhaled through his nose. "Trent Willis, badge 214. He didn't like it this time. The older officer followed, slower. "Dugan, badge 73. I nodded slightly. Then I turned the phone toward the documents. Captured both maps in the same frame. "Just so we're clear," I said, voice even. "You're standing on my porch, asking me to remove a sign from land this survey says is mine, based on a map that doesn't match county records." No one spoke. Not immediately. Because now it wasn't just a conversation. It was a record. Linda's eyes shifted slightly toward the phone. That's when I saw it. Not anger. Not frustration. Concern. Small. Quick. But real. Willis stepped back half a pace. "This isn't a citation," he said. "We're just advising..." "I'm not removing it," I said. Flat. No room. He looked at me for a second longer, then at Linda, then at Dugan. And something changed. Not a full retreat, but the edge was gone. "All right," he said finally. "We've made our position clear." Position, not authority. They turned without another word. Walked back to their cruisers. Doors shut. Engines started. Linda stayed behind again, same as last time. She stepped closer this time. Not onto the porch, but closer. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "I'm making it accurate." Her jaw tightened. "People here expect access," she said again. "And I expect ownership to mean something," I answered. We stood there for a second, neither moving. Then she shook her head once like she'd just confirmed something to herself. "This won't end the way you think," she said. Then she turned and walked back to her car. This time she didn't look back. I stood there until the last cruiser disappeared down the road. Then I looked at the sign, still standing, still clear. But now it meant something different. Before, it was a boundary. Now, it was evidence. Because they hadn't just questioned it. They'd documented themselves doing it. And they hadn't just come once. They came back, which meant they were invested. And people don't invest that kind of effort into something small. I picked up both maps and looked at them again, side by side. One real, one altered. Same land, different story, and now, they'd just put themselves inside that story. The question wasn't whether I was right anymore. The question was, how far were they willing to go to prove I was wrong? I stopped asking them, started asking the land instead. The next morning, I didn't make any calls, didn't go back into town, didn't argue with anyone. I went out to the truck, grabbed a notebook, and walked the property line from one end to the other. Slow, careful. Every step mattered now. The trail was busier than it had been the week before. Fresh prints layered over older ones. Some deep, some light, all moving in the same direction, toward the lake. More people, more confidence. Someone had told them the sign didn't matter. I followed the path down to the creek and stopped where the fence had been pushed loose before. It had been fixed, solid. But just past it, I saw something new. A survey stake. Wooden, freshly driven. Not one of mine. I crouched down and brushed the dirt away from its base. It hadn't been there long. Still clean. No weathering. Whoever put it in knew what they were doing. Placed just close enough to suggest a boundary shift, but not so obvious that anyone would question it without looking twice. I stood up slowly and looked around. No one in sight. But I didn't feel alone anymore. I pulled my phone out and took a picture. Then another. Different angles. Close. Wide. Context. Documentation. That word had been sitting in the back of my mind since the second time those cruisers rolled up. Now it was front and center. By midday, I was in town again. Not at the county office this time. At a small brick building just off Main Street. Ethan Blake's name was on the door. He'd handled a property dispute for a friend of mine a few years back. Quiet guy. Didn't waste words. Didn't lose cases he cared about. I stepped inside. He looked up from behind his desk as I came in, already reading the situation, before I said a word. "What's going on?" he asked. I set the folder down in front of him. "Someone's trying to move my boundary line," I said. That got his attention. He opened the folder, flipped through the survey, then looked at the HOA letter, then the map. Didn't rush, didn't react. Just studied. After a minute, he leaned back slightly. "Where'd this come from?" he asked, tapping the altered map. "HOA," I said. "They brought it with police." He nodded once. "Of course they did." I slid my phone across the desk and showed him the pictures of the survey stake. "Found that this morning," I added. He looked at the images, zoomed in, then out. Then he set the phone down. "All right," he said. "Here's what matters." He tapped the certified survey. "This is the only thing that counts legally," he said. "Filed, recorded, verifiable." Then he tapped the altered map. "This is a narrative," he added. I didn't interrupt. "People think disputes like this are about land," he continued. "They're not. They're about perception. If enough people believe that line is somewhere else, eventually someone tries to make it official." He looked at me directly. "And right now, they're building that belief." I folded my arms. "So what do we do?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "You stop talking," he said. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Talking is what they want," he continued. "Arguments, confrontations, complaints. That muddies everything, gives them room to claim confusion." He tapped the desk once. "You don't give them confusion," he said. "You give them records." I nodded slowly. "What kind of records?" I asked. "Everything," he said. "Every interaction, every time someone steps on your land, every change to your fence, every document they send, every conversation they try to have." He paused, then added, "You make it impossible for them to pretend this is accidental." That sat with me. "Because it's not," I said. He gave a small, almost humorless smile. "No," he said, "it's not." By the time I left his office, I wasn't thinking about the sign anymore, or even the trail. I was thinking about patterns and how to catch them. That afternoon, I went into town again. Different stops this time. Hardware store, security supplier, then back home. By sunset, I had boxes laid out across the kitchen table. Trail cameras, motion sensors, cabling, a network video recorder. More than I'd ever thought I'd need for 4 acres of quiet land. I didn't rush the setup, took my time. Placed cameras where they mattered, not just on the trail, but along the fence line, near the creek, and facing the approach to the house. Angles mattered, coverage mattered. If someone stepped onto my land, I wanted to know when, where, and how long they stayed. By nightfall, everything was active, silent, watching. I stood on the porch for a while after that, looking out toward the trail. It looked the same. Same trees, same dirt path, same sign standing where it had been. But now there was something else. A shift. Not in the land, in the approach. Because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was recording. And people behave differently when they think they're in control. They push further, take more, expose more. That's what Ethan meant. Let them build their story. Then show everyone exactly how they built it. The phone buzzed in my hand. Motion alert. Trail camera. I opened the app. 2 figures, just at the edge of the frame. Moving slowly. Deliberate. Not passing through. Stopping. Looking. Measuring. I watched the clip twice. Then a third time. They weren't lost. They weren't wandering. They were working. I set the phone down on the railing and looked out into the dark. The land hadn't changed. The boundaries hadn't moved. But the people trying to redraw them, they were getting bolder. And now, I was ready to see how far they'd go. It didn't take long. The next alert came just after midnight. I was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with the laptop open, running through the footage from earlier that evening. The system pinged once. Sharp, clean, unmistakable. Motion detected. Rear trail. I didn't rush, didn't jump up, just turned the screen toward me and opened the live feed. 2 figures stepped into frame. Not kids this time. Not random. Adults. They moved slow. Careful. One stayed slightly behind the other, scanning the ground, occasionally stopping to look down, then ahead again. I recognized her immediately. Linda Carver. Even in low light, even in grainy footage, she carried herself the same way. Controlled. Deliberate. Like every step had already been planned. The man with her wasn't familiar. He wore a jacket with reflective strips on the sleeves, carried something long and narrow in one hand. Not a tool you bring for a walk. He crouched once, pressed something into the ground, then stood and checked a device in his other hand. Survey equipment. I leaned closer to the screen. They weren't using the trail. They were mapping it. My land. My boundary. Measured like it was already theirs. I hit record on the system backup, making sure the footage was locked and duplicated automatically. No chance of losing it. They moved deeper along the line, stopping every 20 feet or so. The man would mark something. Linda would stand nearby, watching, occasionally pointing. Then they stopped near the creek, close enough for the audio pickup to catch fragments. Line needs to hold. Access here makes phase 2 cleaner. Once it's recognized, the rest was lost in static and distance. But I didn't need the full sentence. I had enough. I played it back once. Then again. Phase 2, same words from earlier, same tone. Not speculation. Expectation. I sat back slowly in the chair. This wasn't about whether they thought the land was theirs. They were planning as if it already was. I saved the clip, labeled it, backed it up again. Then I picked up my phone and sent it to Ethan. No explanation. Just the footage. He called 5 minutes later. "You're seeing this live?" he asked. "Recorded," I said. "They've been here at least 10 minutes. He didn't respond right away. I could hear him replaying it on his end. "All right," he said finally. "That's not a walk." "No," I said. "It's not." "That's surveying," he continued. "And not casually. That's someone positioning something." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "They're marking a line that doesn't exist," I said. "Exactly," he replied. Silence for a second. Then he added, "Daniel, listen carefully. This just changed the situation." "How?" I asked. "They've moved from narrative to action," he said. "Before, it was paper. Now it's physical." I watched the screen again as Linda stepped back, looked down the line they'd marked, then nodded once, like she was approving it. "They're preparing to justify that map," I said. "Yes," Ethan replied. "And if they can establish visible markers, consistent use, and no resistance." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "They create a version of reality," I said. "Exactly." I looked back at the footage. "They're not guessing anymore," I added. "They know where they want that line." "And they're betting you won't stop them in a way that holds up legally," Ethan said. That landed. Because he was right. Confronting them in the dark would do nothing. Arguing with them wouldn't change anything. But recording it, that mattered. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Nothing tonight," he said immediately. "You don't confront. You don't interrupt. You let them keep going." I frowned slightly. "Let them?" I said. "Yes," he replied. "Because right now, every step they take is evidence. The more they do, the harder it is for them to deny it later." I looked at Linda again on the screen. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't hiding. She thought she was working ahead of me. "That's a risk," I said. "So is stopping them without proof," Ethan answered. Silence again. Then I nodded slowly. "All right," I said. "Document everything," he added. "Timestamps, locations. Save backups off-site if you can." "I already am." "I figured," he said. The call ended. I stayed where I was, watching until they left. They didn't rush out, didn't sneak. They finished what they came to do, then walked back the way they came, confident, unchallenged. By the time the feed went still again, the land looked exactly the same. But it wasn't. Because now there were markers out there. Not legal, not real, but visible. And that was the point. I closed the laptop and stepped out onto the porch. The night was quiet. Too quiet. I could almost trace their path in my head. Every step, every mark, every line they were trying to redraw. I didn't go down there, didn't check it, didn't disturb anything. Because Ethan was right. Let them build it. Let them believe it. Let them commit to it. Then show exactly how it was built. I leaned against the railing and looked out into the dark. The land hadn't moved. The truth hadn't changed. But the story they were trying to tell, that was getting clearer by the hour. And now, I knew there was something bigger coming. The only question left was, what exactly was Phase 2? I got the answer 3 days later. It didn't come from Linda. It didn't come from the HOA. It came from someone who had already decided to walk away from them. Her name was Megan Price. She called just after noon. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. "Is this Daniel Mercer?" she asked. "Depends who's asking," I said. There was a pause, then quieter. "My name is Megan Price. I used to work for Lake Ridge Estates. I think you need to hear something." I didn't respond right away. People don't just call out of nowhere with that kind of line unless something's already gone wrong. "What kind of something?" I asked. "The kind that doesn't stay quiet much longer," she said. That was enough. We didn't meet on my land, didn't meet anywhere near the HOA. We met 20 minutes outside town, at a diner just off the highway where no one asked questions and no one cared who you were. She was already there when I walked in. Mid-30s, tired eyes, posture tight like she'd been carrying something heavy for too long. She didn't waste time. No introductions beyond her name. No small talk. She slid a folder across the table. "You should look at that," she said. I opened it. First page, site plan. Second, elevation drawings. Third, financial projections. It didn't take long to see what I was looking at. A marina. Boat slips. Dock extensions. Parking access. Walking paths. Utility lines. All mapped clean and clear. And right in the middle of it, my land. Highlighted. Outlined. Labeled. Access corridor. I looked up at her. "This is real?" I asked. She nodded once. "Been in planning for almost a year," she said. "They needed lake access expansion. Your property is the easiest route." "Easiest doesn't make it legal," I said. "No," she replied, "but it makes it profitable." I flipped through more pages. Internal emails, meeting notes, budget outlines. Every piece pointed in the same direction. Development, expansion, control. "This is what Phase 2 is," she said. I leaned back slightly. "So Phase 1 is the trail," I said. "Yes," she answered. "Establish access. Normalize it. Make it look like it's always been shared." "And once that sticks," I continued. "They argue the land serves a broader community function," she finished. "Then it becomes a legal fight instead of a clear boundary." I closed the folder halfway. "They don't own it," I said. "No," she agreed. "But if enough people believe they do, they can make it messy enough that you either settle or lose time and money fighting it." I studied her for a second. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Because I've seen this before," she said. "Different names, same strategy." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive, set it on the table. "That's everything I could take before I left," she added. "Emails, drafts, internal discussions. You'll find the same phrase repeated a few times." "What phrase?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Secure access first. Ownership becomes easier after." There it was. Exactly what I'd heard on the footage. Not a guess, not a theory, a plan. I picked up the drive and turned it in my fingers. "Who else knows about this?" I asked. "No one who's willing to say it out loud," she said. Why now? I pressed. She exhaled slowly. Because they're getting impatient, she said. And when people like Linda get impatient, they stop being careful. That matched what I'd seen. The visits, the markers, the police. They weren't testing anymore. They were pushing. What happens if I do nothing? I asked. She leaned back slightly. They keep building the story, she said. More usage, more community reliance, more pressure. Eventually, it looks like you're the one disrupting something established. And if I push back? I asked. They escalate, she said simply. I nodded. That wasn't new. That was already happening. I closed the folder and slid it back toward me. All right, I said. Then I don't push. Not yet. She watched me carefully. What do you do, she asked. I document, I said. A faint shift in her expression. Understanding. That's the only thing that holds up, I added. She nodded. Then you're already ahead of them, she said. We sat in silence for a second. Then she stood. That's everything I have, she said. After this, I'm out of it. I stood as well. Why? I asked. She paused, then said quietly, because my father lost land the same way. No explanation beyond that. Didn't need one. She left without another word. I stayed a few minutes longer, looking at the folder, then the flash drive. Then I got up, paid for the coffee, and walked out. By the time I got back to the truck, I wasn't thinking about the trail anymore, or the sign, or even the map. I was thinking about scale. Because this wasn't a neighbor dispute. This wasn't an HOA overstepping. This was a development plan worth millions, and I was standing in the middle of it. I drove straight to Ethan's office. Didn't call ahead. Just walked in and set the folder down in front of him. Phase 2, I said. He opened it, read the first page, then the second, then the third. His expression didn't change much, but I saw it in his eyes. Confirmation. They're not improvising, he said. No, I replied. They're executing. He picked up the flash drive. May I? He asked. I nodded. He plugged it in. Files loaded. Emails opened. And there it was. Clear. Unfiltered. Acquire trail access first. Ownership challenge becomes significantly easier afterward. Spelled wrong. Didn't matter. The intent was perfect. Ethan leaned back slowly. Well, he said, now we know what they're building. I crossed my arms. They're building a case, I said. No, he corrected quietly. They're building leverage. That word hit harder, because leverage isn't about truth. It's about pressure. And they're counting on you to break first, he added. I looked at the screen one more time, then at him. They're not getting that, I said. He nodded once. Good, he said, because now we stop watching. I raised an eyebrow. And start preparing, he finished. I didn't ask how, didn't need to, because the line had already been crossed. And once that happens, there's only one direction left to go forward. They didn't wait long. 2 nights after I met with Ethan, the system lit up again. Not one alert. Multiple. Front approach, trail entrance, fence line. I opened the live feed and saw shadows moving where they shouldn't be. 2 figures at the trail entrance. Not walking, working. One of them carried a pry bar. The other moved straight to the post I'd set myself. The steel one sunk deep, meant to last. I watched as the bar slid under the edge of the sign. Metal flexed. The first pull didn't move it. The second did. By the third, the post shifted just enough to loosen the base. They didn't rush, didn't look around. like they knew no one would stop them. The sign came free in under a minute. Private property, gone. They dropped it in the dirt like it didn't matter. Then they moved to the fence. Same pattern. Deliberate. Targeted. One grabbed a survey stake, the one I'd photographed, and yanked it out of the ground. Snapped it in half. Threw it aside. Not vandalism. Correction. They were erasing anything that contradicted their version of the boundary. I recorded everything. Didn't move. Didn't intervene. Because this was exactly what Ethan meant. They weren't hiding anymore. They were committing. By morning, I walked the line. Sign gone, fence damaged, stake removed, and fresh tracks leading back toward the HOA side of the property. I took pictures of everything. Angles, close-ups, context. Then I sent it all to Ethan. He called within minutes. They just handed us multiple counts, he said. I figured, I replied. Destruction of property, boundary interference, potential trespass with intent, he listed calmly. I leaned against the truck. They're cleaning the line, I said. No, he corrected. They're trying to make it look like their version was always correct. That was worse, because it meant they weren't reacting to me. They were shaping the ground itself. What now? I asked. There was a pause, then, now we escalate, he said. That word carried weight. How? I asked. We make sure they know we have everything, he said. And we make sure they preserve every piece of communication they've created. I knew what that meant. Paper, records, pressure. That afternoon, Ethan sent it. Formal notice. Preservation demand. Every email, every message, every internal document related to the trail, the land, the access dispute. Legally binding, non-negotiable. A line drawn in ink instead of dirt. When Linda got that letter, everything changed. Because until then, she'd been operating in control. Now, she was exposed. That night, I was at Ethan's office when the next alert came in. Not the trail, the house. Front porch camera. I opened the feed. Linda Carver stood on my porch. Not alone. Officer Trent Willis was beside her, and behind them, Officer Dugan. They weren't knocking. They were looking, scanning, checking windows, checking angles, like they were confirming something. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. They know, I said quietly. Ethan leaned over the screen. They know you're recording, he replied. Linda stepped closer to the side of the porch, toward the mudroom entrance, a door most people wouldn't notice unless they'd been looking for it. She reached into her bag, pulled something out. Slim. Metal. I felt my jaw tighten. No, I said under my breath. She crouched, slid the tool into the lock, and in less than 30 seconds, the door opened. Willis looked around once, then stepped inside. Dugan followed. Linda went in last, closed the door behind them. Silence. No hesitation. No doubt. No authority. Just entry. Illegal. Deliberate. Ethan didn't say anything for a second. Then, call the county, he said. Not the town. Not local. County. Different chain. Different jurisdiction. Different outcome. I picked up the phone and dialed, kept my voice steady. This is Daniel Mercer, I said. I have live video of 2 town officers and a civilian inside my residence without a warrant or permission. The dispatcher didn't interrupt, didn't question, just asked, "Are they still inside?" "Yes," I said. "Units are on the way." I ended the call and looked back at the screen. Inside the house, they moved fast, not searching randomly, targeted. Linda went straight past the kitchen, down the hallway, toward the utility room, toward the equipment. She wasn't looking for ownership papers. She wasn't checking documents. She knew exactly where to go. The NVR, the recording system. Willis opened drawers in my office. Dugan checked cabinets. Linda reached the equipment rack, paused, then started pulling cables, looking for storage, looking for backup, looking for anything that held what they'd done. "They're not trying to prove anything," I said. "They're trying to erase it," Ethan replied. That was it. That was phase 2. Not legal, not paperwork. Control the narrative, then remove anything that contradicts it. The flashing blue lights hit the driveway less than 2 minutes later. 3 vehicles. County sheriff. They moved fast. No hesitation. No waiting. The front door opened hard. Voices filled the house. Commands. Clear. Direct. "Step away from that! Hands where we can see them!" Linda froze. Willis froze. Dugan didn't move. For the first time since this started, they weren't in control. I watched it all on the screen. Every second, every shift, every realization hitting them at once. Because this time, they weren't writing the story. They were inside it. And this time, there was no editing their way out. I watched as the deputies moved through my house with a kind of calm authority that didn't need to be loud to be effective. Deputy Cole Ramirez stepped forward first, eyes sharp, posture steady. "Does anyone here have a warrant?" he asked. No one answered. Not Linda. Not Willis. Not Dugan. "Does anyone here have permission from the property owner to be inside this residence?" he continued. Still nothing. Silence can say a lot, and in that moment, it said everything. I was already on my way back when the second patrol car pulled in. Gravel kicked up under my tires as I came to a stop. I stepped out, not rushing, not running. No reason to. This wasn't my problem to solve anymore. It was theirs. I walked up the steps as Deputy Ramirez turned toward me. "You the homeowner?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "You give them permission to be inside?" "No." He nodded once. That was all he needed. Behind him, Linda stood near the hallway, her posture gone rigid. The same woman who had walked onto my porch days ago with quiet certainty now looked like she was calculating outcomes instead of controlling them. Willis kept his hands visible. Dugan didn't say a word. Ramirez stepped past me and into the kitchen. "What's this about?" he asked. I didn't raise my voice. "They've been disputing my boundary line," I said, using altered maps, removing markers, entering without permission. Ramirez looked at me for a second longer, then said, "Show me." I walked to the table and pulled out both documents. My certified survey, their version, set them side by side. Same land, different lines. He leaned over, studying both carefully. Didn't rush, didn't assume, just looked. Then he called one of the other deputies over. "Take a look at this," he said. They compared them in silence. Then Ramirez straightened. "These don't match," he said. "No," I replied. "They don't." He turned toward Linda. "Ma'am," he said, voice even, "where did this map come from?" Linda didn't answer right away. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked unsure. "It's part of our HOA records," she said finally. Ramirez held her gaze. Records filed with the county? He asked. No, she said. That was it. That was the break. Because in that moment, the difference between documentation and fabrication became clear to everyone in the room. Ramirez turned back to me. You said they've been removing markers? He asked. Yes, I said. And I have footage. That got everyone's attention. I walked over to the system, pulled up the recordings, trail cameras, timestamps, clear as day. Linda walking the boundary with a surveyor, markers being placed, then later, markers being removed, fence damaged, sign taken down. The room stayed quiet as the footage played. Then came the final clip, the one from earlier, the one where they entered. Ramirez didn't speak until it ended. Then he looked at Willis. You want to explain this? He asked. Willis swallowed once. No warrant, Ramirez added. No consent. No exigent circumstances. Still no answer. Dugan shifted slightly, but didn't step in. Linda's eyes moved between the screen and the deputies. For the first time, she wasn't controlling the pace. She was reacting to it. One of the deputies picked up something from the counter. A folded piece of paper. He opened it. Set it flat. The altered map. Ramirez looked at it again, then back at my survey, then back at Linda. These boundaries were changed, he said. Not a question, a statement. No one argued, because there was nothing left to argue. I stepped back slightly, letting it unfold, because this wasn't about convincing anyone anymore. It was about showing them. Ramirez motioned toward the evidence. We're going to need copies of all of this, he said. You'll have them, I replied. He nodded once, then turned to the others. Secure everything, he said. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. And just like that, the power shifted, completely. Linda took a step back. Small, barely noticeable, but it was there. The first step she hadn't chosen. Because this wasn't her ground anymore. This wasn't her narrative. This was documentation. And documentation doesn't bend. As the deputies began collecting information, I looked at the two maps one more time, side by side. One truth, one lie. Same land, same lines. Only one backed by law. Ramirez walked back over to me. You did the right thing calling this in, he said. I nodded. I figured it was past a conversation, I replied. He glanced toward Linda and the officers. Yeah, he said. It is. I looked out toward the trail through the open doorway. Same path, same trees, same ground. Nothing had changed out there, but everything had changed in here, because the moment those maps hit the table, the story they'd been building collapsed under its own weight. And now, there was only one question left. What would it cost them? The answer didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. Statements first. I spent the next morning at the county sheriff's office, sitting across from Deputy Ramirez and another investigator, while they logged everything. Footage, documents, timelines. They didn't rush me. Didn't interrupt. Just let the facts stack up the way they were supposed to. Video of the survey markers being placed. Video of them being removed. The break-in. The altered map. Every piece fit. Not clean, but clear. Has anyone else been involved? One of them asked. I thought about it. About the meetings. The documents Megan had given me. The HOA board, I said. At least part of it. Ramirez nodded. We'll follow that, he said. And they did. Within a week, subpoenas went out. Emails got pulled. Meeting minutes surfaced. And the story Linda had been building started to come apart under its own weight. Because what looked like a misunderstanding from the outside didn't hold up under record. The phrase showed up more than once. Secure access first. Establish usage. Position for expansion. Different emails, different dates, same plan. By the time Ethan and I sat down to review everything, it wasn't a question of what happened anymore. It was a question of how much of it could be proven. Enough, he said. That was all I needed. The civil side moved fast after that. Injunction first, temporary but immediate. No further activity on the trail, no changes to the boundary, no contact, no exceptions. The criminal side took longer. It always does. But pressure builds in ways people don't always expect. The HOA's attorney filed a response within days. Careful language, distance, clarification. But not denial. Not really. Because denial requires confidence, and they didn't have that anymore. Board members started stepping back. Emails slowed, then stopped. The same people who had been so certain weeks earlier suddenly had nothing to say. Linda lasted longer than most, but even she couldn't hold it together once the hearing date was set. By then, it wasn't just paperwork. It was public. Local paper picked it up first, then regional. Boundary dispute turns criminal. That's how they framed it. They weren't wrong. In court, it didn't take long. The county surveyor testified first, walked through the official records, line by line, clear, unbroken, consistent. The boundary has not changed, he said. Then came the document examiner. Explained the altered map, how the lines had been shifted, adjusted, printed to look legitimate, but not filed, not recorded, not real. Then Ethan introduced the footage. No commentary, no spin, just video. Linda on my land. Survey markers going in. Survey markers coming out. Fence damage. The entry. The search. The attempt to access recording equipment. You don't argue with footage like that. You absorb it. And the room did. By the time the emails were introduced, there wasn't much left to defend. Acquire trail access first. Ownership becomes easier after. Read out loud. Slow. Clear. Final. I watched Linda when that line was spoken. Not angry, not defiant, just still. Like the realization had finally caught up to her. This wasn't something she could talk her way out of. The rulings came down a few weeks later. The HOA's claim, dismissed, completely. No easement, no shared access, no ambiguity. The development plan, dead. No permits, no approval, no path forward. Linda resigned before the board could formally remove her. Didn't stay to argue. Didn't stay to explain. Officer Willis lost his badge. Dugan followed shortly after. Internal review, policy violations, conduct issues. They didn't fight it. They couldn't. Because this time, everything was on record. A month later, the land looked exactly the way it had before all of this started. Fence repaired. Survey marker reset. This time deeper. Permanent. The trail was still there. Of course it was. Dirt doesn't move because people argue over it. But the traffic stopped. Not because of the sign. Because of the truth behind it. I stood there one evening, looking down that same path. The one that had started all of this. Then I set a new sign. Stronger post. Same message. Private property. No trespassing. But this time I added something underneath. Smaller. Simpler. You called the cops on the owner. No anger in it. No threat. Just fact. I stepped back, checked the line, made sure everything sat where it was supposed to. Then I walked back to the house. Same porch, same chair, Same view of the trees and the fading light beyond them. For the first time in weeks, there was nothing waiting. No letters, no calls, no footsteps on the trail. Just quiet. The kind I'd bought the land for in the first place. Funny thing is, the land never changed. The boundary never moved. The truth was always right there in the same place it had always been. The only thing that changed was that eventually, everyone else was forced to see it. And once they did, there wasn't anything left to take.
The biggest lesson I learned out of all this is simple, but it's not easy. If you don't stand on your ground early, someone else will try to rebuild it for you. Not with force, not effort, but with paperwork, pressure, and just enough doubt to make you question what you already know is yours. The only thing that held steady through all of it wasn't my voice, and it wasn't my frustration. It's what I record, the truth, written down, back up, and left where it couldn't be moved. There's a quiet kind of strength in that, not in pushing back harder than the other side, but in staying steady long enough for the truth to speak for itself. Land doesn't argue, it doesn't trend because someone wants it to, and neither should you. If you ever deal with something like this, neighbors, an HOA, or anyone trying to tell you what you can or can't do with what's yours, go ahead and drop a simple yes in the comments. I'd like to know how many folks out there have you to stand your ground the hard way. As if you appreciate a story like this, real situations handled with patience, evidence, and a steady hand, consider subscribing. There's more coming, and I will see you in the next one.